A federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit brought against General Motors over a defective ignition switch. This comes after evidence was discovered that suggests the consumer bringing the case had committed fraud. WSJ Law Deputy Bureau Chief Ashby Jones is here to explain. Hi, Ashby. Good to see you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So this is just the beginning of a series of cases that GM is set to hear. Is that correct?
That's right. So the way it works is typically in a situation like this where you have hundreds upon hundreds of lawsuits, they'll typically set aside 5 or 6 to go to trial first. And they'll take the outcome of those cases, and then that'll provide sort of a measuring stick or a barometer for how settlement talks will go for the rest of the myriad cases.
Right.
So this was the first one. It sort of gets kicked out, so it's kind of a bad thing for the plaintiffs.
Absolutely. And how was the fraud uncovered in this case?
It was really strange. It really didn't have anything to do with the General Motors situation. A realtor who was helping the plaintiff buy a piece of real estate shortly after he had his crash, his allegedly defective airbag crash in a General Motors car, found that he had submitted some fraudulent paperwork and brought this to the attention of General Motors. General Motors surfaced it, and they just decided, you know, this guy, he's not credible enough, he doesn't make a very good plaintiff, so we'll just kind of set this case aside and move forward.
Wow, as you said, a bad start for the plaintiff's attorneys, but does this also suggest that perhaps the tide is shifting for GM?
I don't know how much you can read into it. I mean, I think it suggests maybe that the plaintiffs weren't as prepared as they needed to be, and that could bode ill for them heading down the line if if they've also picked cases to go forward that aren't really ready for prime time.
Do we know anything about those other cases at this point? Do we have any information?
Well, they're all sort of a similar vein, right? You've got a person who was driving in a General Motors car and allegedly, hit something very minor on the ignition switch, the airbag deployed, and injuries happened.
Right.
So they're all sort of similar. The variations on the plaintiffs, we'll see just what they're all about.
Right.
But this one certainly didn't go well for the plaintiffs.
And aside from this little chunk of 6 cases, then the GM still faces countless suits after that?
Countless, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, not all of those will go to trial. Again, what they do is they sort of try to take a cross-section, a snapshot, so to speak, of how these things will likely play out. The plaintiffs and defendants kind of get a sense as to where the verdict comes down, or and that'll be the starting point for settlement talks for the rest of them.
And in this case where the plaintiff was found to have committed fraud, he's walking away with nothing, correct?
Yeah, well, I actually don't know. They basically settled the case. Settlement terms weren't disclosed.
Right.
I can't imagine it was for very much.
Right.
But yeah, not a good way to start for the plaintiffs.
Absolutely not. Ashby Jones, thank you so much for that.
You bet.